Iron Banner. This contest will shape you into something stronger. Go. The hunt is on. If this is your end, fight well. The howls are quiet. Return to the fight. Good counter. Now hit them again. Hunting you. Stand strong. Return to the fight. That's two. Zone advantage is yours. I've only seen Aphrodite do better. That's two. 3 opponents down. The flames are lit, and you are the prey. Five minutes remain. Two down. Three opponents down. Let the wolves rest. The hunt is over. Almost over. Don't let them have it easy. The wolf's howl may be the last thing you hear. I've only seen Aphrodite do better. Could have gone better. When the Iron Lords faced defeat, there was only one option. Fight again. Iron Banner. Use everything in your power. Fight and prevail. wolf's howl may be the last thing you hear. I've only seen Aphrodite do better. The flames have gone cold. Zone advantage is yours. The flames have ignited. Let the wolves hunt. The flames have gone cold. You have the advantage. Press on. You have the advantage. Press on. You are in control. Show them what that means. I'm calling it. Guardian, crush them. Another hunt will come soon. Well fought and well won. Be proud of what you've done today.
All right, guys, I gotta tell you, I am very much excited to be making this video today, and in my opinion, this right here is what it's all about. We're going to be talking about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, a new AAA PlayStation 5 exclusive that's going to be releasing at the end of the week, and GPU. It is extremely impressive. I mean, all of this is just making for, in my opinion, this seems like the game that's truly going to show what next gen has the potential to be. We know that not every single game from Sony's first party studios is going to be a true PlayStation 5 exclusive, and I think that that's okay, but it's nice. It is very nice to be here, you know, a little over half a year since the PS5 launched, to have a game like this that really is that showcase title, right? And it's doing some crazy things.
Ratchet & Clank have been doing the whole saving the universe thing for quite some time, and their latest adventure, Rift Apart, amusingly acknowledges that right from the start. But the duo's age doesn't show at all, thanks to an amazing multi-dimensional trip unlike anything the series has done before. It's a gorgeous and expertly crafted example of what PS5 exclusives can look and play like, as well as Insomniac's most heartfelt and hilarious story in years.
Let us see what today's Guardians are made of.
This is extremely unnecessary.
Whether you're new to swinging Ratchet's wrench or a veteran of the Dread Zone, Rift Apart's mix of third-person shooting and platforming is immediately easy to understand. Ratchet has always been a series about exploration and combat, and thanks to the dip-free stability of the 30 frames per second fidelity mode, the latter in particular has never felt so good. And while I've only gotten to spend a bit of time with them so far, the performance and performance ray tracing modes are even smoother at a steady 60 frames per second. I'm completely okay with sacrificing some of the visual effects on my challenge mode run, thanks to how well the higher frame rate keeps up with Rift Apart's complete chaos. That sensation of never slowing down is also thanks to the spectacular load times, which are, as promised, practically non-existent. That's achieved despite the fact that this is the prettiest PS5 game yet, and it's probably one of the best looking games I've ever played. Back in the day, we used to see all these Ratchet & Clank looks almost like a Pixar movie comparisons. And with Rift Apart's impressive use of ray tracing reflections and other graphical updates, this series has just about kept pace with Pixar's recent work in Incredibles 2 and Soul. A Rift Apart also gives Pixar a run for its money in its ability to tell an emotional story while also maintaining its excellent comedy. While it's the funniest game I've played in some time, the writing strikes just the right balance between that comedy and the heartfelt, the silly, and the sincere.
What is this?
The story's exploration of the multiverse sees the debut of Rivet, a playable parallel of Ratchet who proves to be one of Insomniac's best-written characters ever, and yet another memorable performance from voice acting veteran Jennifer Hale.
Ready to kick some robo-butt?
Rivet's characterization isn't just a gender slur. She's a distinctive personality all her own, with unique wants, hopes, and problems, including trust issues that come from years of fighting without a parallel Clank by her side. I can't imagine a new Ratchet & Clank without her now, and the series is all the better for it. While it's a little disappointing that Rivet doesn't get her own set of moves, it at least means you don't have to worry about upgrading and equipping the two protagonists independently when you land on a new planet and are automatically switched from one to the other. None of that is to say the headline duo gets the short end of the intergalactic stick. Ratchet is going to struggle over whether he actually wants to find the rest of his cat-like life looms large, while Clank's own sense of self-worth in the face of injury is moving. Rift Apart has a surprisingly deft approach to dealing with mental health topics among its entire cast in ways that feel honest and human, and it's all wrapped up in this exciting, bright, and bubbly adventure. The stunning graphics and excellent storytelling are backed by Mark Mothersbaugh's great score. It sounds like a cousin of his fantastic Thor Ragnarok work, mixing familiar franchise themes with new orchestral takes in a series of symphonies. Moment-to-moment gameplay also has new nuances for returning fans to explore. Ratchet and Rivet's movement has been fine-tuned since the 2016 reboot on PS4, and simple additions like a beautifully animated dash move and wall running make a world of difference. It not only allows for trickier and more intricate platforming sections
zones
and
are
more
yours.
varied collectible placement, but it brings new refinements
fires
to
are
combat
lit.
as well.
Find your
The
prey
dodge
and
ability allows the Lombaxes to phase through incoming attacks, and timing a dash just right to get in close and deal big damage is a consistent new thrill. I found that I've used Ratchet's Wrench a lot less frequently in Rift Apart than I did in previous games because of the increased scale of battles. You need to be more clever with your array of wacky weaponry, and the rifts scattered throughout come in handy both for battles and scouring the environment. It's certainly reminiscent of jumping through a portal in, well, Portal, but the
Let
effect
the
of the new
wolves
location
rest.
hurtling
The
towards you,
hunt
coupled with
is
the dual
over.
senses haptics, gives rifts their own distinct flair, while adding much more tactical variety to combat than the series has ever seen. And Rift Apart's arsenal of weapons let you make the most of those opportunities, especially with some instant classics like the Topiary Sprinkler and the Ricochet. Because you're facing more enemies at a time than in the previous games, and often different combinations of them, I also found myself switching between weapons more than ever before. That leads to a satisfying loop of offensive, defensive, and crowd control maneuvers that keeps combat lively throughout. These weapons are, of course, where you'll also get the most use
Zone
out of the
advantage
DualSense's
is
haptics.
yours.
Each weapon's firepower, from the wild booms of the Enforcer to the
5
short
minutes
blips of the
left.
burst pistol,
Sound
is
tactics
mirrored
so
in the
far.
controller's advanced rumble. Naturally, Rift Apart isn't all about combat, as any action platformer worth its bolts, coins, studs, rings, whatever you want to call them, will find ways to vary up gameplay. However, some of these segments were the only part of the campaign where I felt momentum was lost. For instance, there are occasional bits where Ratchet or Rivet have to hitch a ride on a speedy space slug to avoid poisonous water. It's amusing the first time or two, but never really becomes anything more than getting from point A to point B. To be fair, there are many other twists that fare much better, like Clank's clever physics puzzle sections, optional pocket dimensions hidden throughout Rift Apart's worlds that offer engaging platforming challenges, and a new battle arena where you can earn some extra upgrades in between story missions. And one of my favorite additions is the introduction of Glitch, a tiny software companion whose endearing personality and journey of self-discovery is positively charming. I eventually finished Rift Apart's campaign after about 16 hours, having completed 90% of everything including those collectibles. Beating the story also unlocks the perennial challenge mode though, that amps up the difficulty substantially and lets you upgrade weapons even more. And that's a good thing because Rift Apart's standard difficulty is a relatively breezy one. I may have died 2 or 3 times in battle at the most. But that said, I had enough close calls early on to really drive home the benefits of staying mobile, varying up my weapon use, and keeping an eye on ammo.
You okay, Bolts?
Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is a
Almost won.
stunner.
Don't
It not
give up.
only gives the
They
latest
won't.
generation of consoles a game that looks as beautiful as the improved tech promised, but it's also a
3 minutes
fantastic
remain.
experience
Keep the
to play.
pressure and you have
Insomniac has been around the Ratchet & Clank block plenty of times before, but Rivet and other new characters add so much charm, wit, and heart to a franchise I've loved for most of my life. That's
Like
coupled
the
with
hunters
series
of
best
old.
action platforming gameplay and incredible art and sound design across the board. Rift Apart may not be the biggest adventure around, but its big heart, wild weapons, and incredible detail easily make it one of the most memorable of the generation and the year so far.
Losses happen.
For more on Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, be sure to check out our performance review for even more of a breakdown on the visual modes offered in this latest Ratchet & Clank adventure, and be sure to
Defeat is
check out our
not the
Podcast
end.
Beyond spoiler-free
Be
discussion on the
defiant,
game.
Guardian.
And for everything
Fight
else in the
again.
multiverse, you're already in the right place, IGN. Generation and the year
Iron Banner. Let a new chapter commence. Opponent claimed Zone A. You captured Zone C. Opponent claimed Zone B.
Just dragging the submissive spear through the environment always looks so
resembling an offline CGI film. We'll be looking at each of these features and more as we explore this new game in detail. Rift Apart features some of the most beautiful and largest scale sequences we've seen in the series to date. Before we get into the details though, it should be mentioned that most of this video was made prior to the release of the Day 1 patch. We'll be saving analysis of the 60 frames per second ray tracing mode for a second video coming shortly after this one. So keep an eye out for that, but for now, let's get into it. When Miles Morales launched on PlayStation 5 last fall, its fast loading and impressive ray tracing features stole the spotlight. But at the same time, it left some of us wondering. This is a cross-generation game, so how would these features translate to a game targeting PS5 specifically? Well, by and large, extremely well. More than anything, it's extremely fascinating to see how, what I'd imagine, are lessons learned from Spider-Man being applied to such a different style of game. Rift Apart retains the basic structure of a Ratchet game, however. You'll travel between different areas by way of your ship, and each of these areas offers its own unique visual style and layout. Some are more narrow, action-driven affairs, while others offer a wide open area to explore, the scale of which we've not really seen in this series before. But it's the way you travel between these areas which impresses the most, and this ties directly into the system's SSD. With the arrival of the new generation, the most obvious and expected improvement revolves around faster loading times. The difference is dramatic and game-changing, but ultimately, it's really just about reducing the amount of time spent waiting. This is true of Ratchet as well. Moving between planets is basically instant now, And furthermore, this allows the developers to set up some truly spectacular cutscene events, such as this sequence here where the scene moves seamlessly from one area to the next, almost like a feature film. No pausing or loading to be seen. But Rift Apart is one of the few games to showcase what's possible when used in a different way, essentially using rifts to move across dimensions. We got our first taste of this in one of the game's earlier trailers, with Ratchet launching through multiple dimensions in real time. In the original demo, however, there were noticeable hiccups in performance as areas were loaded and unloaded, but it served as an impressive example of what was possible. This same sequence exists in the final game, and these hiccups have been completely eliminated. At least mostly. I did note an occasional single extra frame here or there on the frame time graph, but it's dramatically better than the demo. And while we're talking about the demo, check out this train station sequence here. The rifts were not drawn within the reflections, so in this case you only see the tentacles coming out of, well, nothing. In the final game, however, the rifts are factored into the ray-traced reflections. I mention these as I do feel it's worth highlighting situations where a final game improves upon an earlier trailer. In this case, there's a genuine upgrade. Of course, this sequence is impressive, but ultimately just for show. The bigger question is, how would this be used within the gameplay? Well, the most basic rift type appears during combat sequences. Target the rift, and you immediately pull yourself towards another section of the map. While the area within the rift object itself shares the same data as the rest of the scene, but it is a separate viewport. It basically works by allowing the player to pull the rift object closer to the camera, and then at some point you cross the threshold, in which case Rivet is transported to that new area of the map. There are other places where portals lead to completely different areas as well, and this does actually need to load two separate scenes. In this case, the game is rendering two unique viewports, and both are fully featured. Motion blur, anti-aliasing, volumetric, shadows, etc. They're all rendered directly within two viewports, enabling seamless transitions between different areas. You can walk between the two areas as you please. And in fact, the same dual viewport technique is used to allow for true cross wipes in cutscenes like this. This may seem trivial at a glance, but in reality, during the wipe effect, each side of the image is a separate viewport being rendered at full rate and quality in real time. It's a very cool technique. But there's a lot more here as well. Things become significantly more ambitious when you arrive at Blizzard Prime. When you arrive, all that remains of the planet is floating rubble. Without the atmosphere of a planet, you're floating in zero G as well. But rather quickly you'll stumble upon one of these large purple crystals, and if you whack it with your hammer, you're instantly transferred to another version of this world before it was destroyed, a different dimension if you will. The alternate dimension is bustling with life, both enemies and NPCs alike. The sun washes over the scene, and boiling lava fills the crevices between the pathways. So what do they do with this then? Well, this directly ties into some of the gameplay mechanics, such as puzzles that you'll solve on this planet. In some cases, you'll need to manipulate elements in one dimension, then switch back to the other to make it through. Later in this stage then, you'll encounter this grind rail section with multiple tracks to jump between. But in this case, purple crystals are placed alongside the track. By hitting them during your grind, it'll swap between the two separate maps. All that's retained is the character momentum, position, and data. It's an impressive sequence. The idea resembles the Effect and Cause mission featured in Titanfall 2 in fact, where you can switch between two time periods with the press of a button. The difference here though with Ratchet is that you're switching between two bespoke maps, only one of which is resident in memory at any time. When you swap between them, only Rivet and Clank remain in memory. Everything else is dumped, and the new map data is pulled from the SSD instantly. There's no tricks here, it really is just that fast. This may not be revolutionary per se, but it's an impressive new feature that both showcases what's possible on next generation machines, while also introducing fun new gameplay mechanics. When people express excitement for next generation hardware, this is the type of feature you might think of, something that is not possible on a last generation console. This game would not work on the PlayStation 4. But of course, this is only one element which defines Rift Apart. And while it's a central feature for the game, the visuals themselves are also key to the experience. What's interesting though is that Ratchet & Clank is one of those rare series, alongside something like say Gran Turismo, which has managed to appear on most PlayStation consoles in some form or another, barring the original PlayStation of course. Thus it's possible to chart the series' trajectory across different generations. From the beginning, it's clear that Insomniac has aimed to build these fantastical futuristic cityscapes suspended miles above ground, and this vision was achieved right from the start on PlayStation 2, even at 60 frames per second. As you track this from generation to generation, the sense of scale remains consistent between them, but we see the granular detail increase dramatically as each new generation arrives. With this in mind, let's start with the minutiae and work our way up to the big picture. Firstly, at the center of any character action game are, well, the characters. Ratchet and Rivet steal the show here with a superb level of detail on display. Insomniac has brought its Strand system, first introduced in Miles Morales on PS5, over to Ratchet as well, enabling fine detail in the fur on many of its characters. Zooming right into Rivet's tail reveals an absurd amount of detail and precision on display. It seems to use a combination of strands and shell textures to create the varied thickness effect on the fur. The main character models at their highest quality feature upward of 250,000 triangles, not including the fur strands, which can multiply this significantly. There is a ton of detail packed into each character, and it's a significant upgrade from what we saw on PlayStation 4. This is matched with superb materials for cloth, leather, and metal, applied directly to their costumes. And the shiny bits all receive ray traced reflections as well. Then there's the eye system, which also uses ray traced reflections along with an artist-driven secondary highlight designed to enhance its toon-like appearance. Characters receive a mix of ray-marched screen space shadows for fine detail, combined with traditional cascaded shadow maps. This detail level is matched to extremely high-quality in-game animations. But beyond this, during cutscenes, it almost resembles a pre-rendered movie. Motion capture was kept to a minimum, and it shows. You don't get that impression of characters marching around in a suit. It really looks like a proper cartoon. The animation also leans into techniques such as squash and stretch to give them that exaggerated look and motion. The point here is simple. Insomniac is showcasing what extra detail means for animated characters running on a next-gen machine. In fact, if you were to compare this against the 2016 film, in many ways Rift Apart comes out on top. Sure, there's aspects of rendering for film that aren't yet possible in real time. This is still the case. But the perception is that we're getting really close, and that's ultimately what matters most, the perception. But it's not just these main characters that receive such lavish detail. Examine any enemy or NPC running around and you'll find comparable levels of quality on display. I was surprised at just how much detail can be found in the minutiae. These critters buzzing around Sargasso, for instance. If you pause and zoom in on the models, you'll find fully modeled insects complete with beautifully rendered eyes, furry extremities, and reflections. Or how about these spent shell casings left behind after combat? From a distance, you wouldn't think much, but stop and zoom in via photo mode, and you'll
Iron
find that
Banner
each one is supremely detailed with smooth, rounded edges and reflections applied to the metal material. It's just an absurd level of detail. So the characters inhabiting these worlds are extremely impressive, but what about
Young
the
wolves and iron
environment
lords, to battle!
Well, as is tradition for Ratchet games, you'll explore a wide range of bespoke areas. From a neon-soaked rainy metropolis under the cover of night, to the aforementioned Blizar Prime, and Odyssey. Walking through some of these environments, stop and look around though, and you'll find that the crowds and stands are numerous. And if you stop and zoom in, very strong stuff. Eventually you run into your old nemesis, Dr. Nefarious, which delivers a
wolf is not the end. Be vigilant.
There's a lot. By now, you should have started to notice the sheer volume of reflective surfaces throughout, and Spider-Man, all varieties can utilize this reflection. Large, mirror-like surfaces to
Another hunt will come soon.
rougher surfaces like this. These reflections add a lot of depth to the world in a way that differs from the Metropolis scene in Spider-Man with its plate glass windows. What's impressive to me is how reflections can apply so well to curved surfaces. In fact, reflections looking into dome-shaped surfaces. But while the artistic application is fantastic, it's the that surprises the most. Not only can you still see all the way out to the horizon, but the resolution of the reflections has improved. In Miles Morales and the official version of Ratchet that I tested, reflections in both
2 zones are
that is,
yours.
if the game was 4K native, reflections would be
Cut their momentum. Keep pushing.
which is exactly what happened in today's video. I was impressed to discover that the effective resolution has been quadrupled. This is in 2160p pixel count in the reflection itself.
The pack is hunting you. Stand strong.
It seems that Insomniac has switched to a checkerboard / sparse. So while the amount of course not
I'm calling it. 10 seconds.
indirect lighting is still pretty calculated.
Can't win them all.
Using a voxelized structure to the diffuse color of surfaces as Ratchet uses a fixed time of day, however.
When the
this
Iron
is an
Lords
effective
faced
solution,
defeat,
which
there
leads
was
to
only
great
one
practice
option.
with minimal
Fight
light leak.
again.
This stage includes a wide range of areas as well. Some man-made, or creature-made, I suppose, and others of more natural origin. I was impressed with the fidelity of the cascaded shadow maps, in particular when coupled with vegetation. Look below the foliage in this scene and you'll see what I mean. There's also some interesting set-piece moments such as this, where you're ramping off of these structures and landing on the back of the creature to take it down. These high-speed sections in particular showcase just how effective Insomniac's motion blur truly is. That said, this planet also reveals that, like Spider-Man, bodies of water still retain the use of screen space reflections rather than utilizing ray tracing. You'll note it when the reflecting object is occluded from view and the reflection disappears in its wake. Now, Blizzard Prime is perhaps even more visually exciting with its dual dimensions. In destroyed form, the sheer volume of detailed geometry and the rich use of colors creates this striking landscape to explore, while the alternate dimension is perhaps more thoroughly inhabited with workers and monsters alike. Honestly, the attention to detail in general is just extremely impressive. Simple things like how transparent shadows tinted by colored glass are featured in certain areas, or in the use of subtle depth of field throughout the game. Naturally, there are many more planets in this game that we can't show in this video. Some of them much larger than anything we've shown here today, it should be noted. But really, at this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what to expect from the game, visually at least. The fast-loading, ray-traced reflections and high level of detail all elevate Rift Apart to a level beyond anything we've really seen in a character action game before. It's suitably next generation, but we haven't talked about performance metrics and image quality just yet, so let's do that. Well, firstly, I have to note, the Day 1 patch arrived just as this video was already in deep production, so as noted earlier, we'll be discussing that in more detail in the next performance-focused video.
Iron
That said,
Banner.
first impressions are solid. 60 frames per second ray tracing mode is very stable, as you would hope. It is worth noting that the performance ray tracing mode was accessible before this patch. By
Young
setting
wolves and
Xbox
Iron
Live
Lords, to
bingo
battle.
Performance at the system menu. But it's clear that the patch itself has brought a whole slew of new features to the table and even better performance. Again, the next video will focus primarily on this mode. But what about the game's
You captured Zone C.
This is
Opponent
what's
claimed
being
Zone
captured
A.
throughout most of this video.
Opponent claimed Zone B.
Dynamic resolution scaling is enabled, however. Okay, is the lowest possible. But in reality, pixel count with some dips to 1800 comparing it to up. Anything lower is extremely rare. The key here is that image quality is kept clean in mode. Insomniac's temporal injection solution remains in use here, being applied to these high It is effectively very much like Spider-Man at launch on PlayStation 5 when using the quality mode. So if you played that game, you should know what to expect here. But what about performance? Again, we'll have more in-depth performance analysis in the coming days, but the quality mode performs as you would expect, both in its pre- and post-patch form. Effectively, we're looking at a near-flawless 30 frames per second using this mode during gameplay. No amount of particles impact performance in this case. It's very fluid and very stable. But that doesn't mean it's 100% perfect. If you recall, in Spider-Man, we noted that duplicate frames can appear between camera cuts during the game's real-time cutscenes, just like this. Unsurprisingly, this behavior has been inherited in Ratchet. Every time the frame cuts, you get a small blip like this. It's not that the frame rate is actually dropping here, it's just an extra 33 millisecond pause, but it is slightly distracting if you know what to look for. We're running out of time here, but I do want to briefly mention the audio as well. Rift Apart makes excellent use of the system's 3D audio capabilities, specifically when using headphones. Here's a sample of what it might sound like within the bustling city. But of course, traditional speaker-based surround sound also sounds excellent. So, with all that said, I believe Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is indeed a showcase
Iron
title
Banner.
for the next generation of consoles. Something that is not possible on PlayStation 4, but like prior entries in the series, I also believe it will stand the test of time. It builds upon the mechanics first introduced in the 2016
Let the
game,
contest
hardware
begin.
improves upon them. It's the best playing entry in the series by far. It also raises the bar as far as storytelling.
Zone C captured. Opponent claimed Zone A.
There are many more ways to explore, and I would definitely recommend doing so. But that's it. We'll be back soon with the performance update. Check it out over on the Patreon. Until next time.
Opponent claimed Zone B. Zone A captured. You have the advantage. Press on. Zone C lost. Zone C captured. Zone advantage is yours. Zone A lost. I'm calling it. 10 seconds. Hard fought, but no victory today. When the Iron Lords faced defeat, there was only one option. Fight again.